Well, welcome back to another week's analysis behind the news. I promised you last week that I'd read the opening paragraph of an article that appeared in the Wall Street Journal about Afghans reach out to Russia on the front page. And this is the opening paragraph. I didn't know whether to laugh or whether to cry. Afghans, battered by worsening security, is reaching out to an old ally and patron, Russia. Well, you know, I didn't think an ally and a patron was somebody who invades you, someone that you had an army rise up from the people and throw the rascals out. And yet they're calling Russia an ally and a patron. Well, it's true if you take the puppet government that the Russians put into the Afghan government when they invaded and took the place over. But the Afghanis didn't want anything to do with it, and so Afghans, you know, I guess the writer, whoever the person is for this particular piece, thinks that Russia is an old ally and patron of Afghanistan. Well, at any rate, what we see happening in the whole Middle East area is a growth of Russian influence. I predict that this crash of the Russian plane will be a ploy to use for further involvement of Russia into the situation in Syria and Egypt and Libya and everywhere else, expanding the scope of where Putin is involved right now. It's not going to be good, I don't think. The sympathy for this Russian plane going down will serve as the basis for them to make further inroads into the so-called war against the rebels there. And speaking of that, it's kind of interesting that everybody, at least all the candidates that I saw in the Republican debate, said that part of the method for curing the problem in the local area, I mean in the general area of where these rebels are trying to take over Syria, is to arm the Kurds. Well, if anybody would take a look at the Kurdish situation, you would know that that would be the quickest way to, first of all, tick off Turkey, it would tick off Iran, it would tick off Iraq, and it would tick off Syria. Because the Kurds all claim a certain portion of all those countries. Now, I'm not going to get into the legitimacy, if you will, of their claim. I mean, they are an indigenous people, they live in those areas, they straddle all those borders, and more power to them to have their own independent state. But the Peshmerga and other aspects of the Kurds are controlled by the old Kurdish Workers' Party. And they used to have the hammer and sickle on their party. And now they're an integral part of the Kurdish movement. And so if you're trying to really get everybody really angry, and if you're trying to promote the growth of communism within the region, yeah, let's help the Kurds. It shows the ignorance sometimes of what's going on in those areas by our own lawmakers. But then, I guess they've been ignorant about a lot of things, haven't they? Here's another one, for instance. Ryan makes good on immigration pledge. And so, as a result of his not pushing through a new plan for immigration that gives amnesty and that sort of thing, all the conservatives are just going goo-gaw over this because he's keeping his pledge. He's going to do the right thing. He promises he wouldn't do it. And see, he's going to be a great Speaker of the House. The only problem with this sort of thing is, as we've pointed out repeatedly in these broadcasts, is that you can stand for something and say you support or do not support something, but down the road support something that will completely overturn what you say you stand for. And that's the case with these immigration things. You can come out and say, I am opposed to amnesty. You can come out and say, I don't want people here in this country. I may even want to ship them all home, for instance. But if I support the trade agreements, the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the Transatlantic Investment Partnership, then I am a liar, maybe out of ignorance, maybe not, because those things will open up more free flow of labor from those various parties that sign on to these treaties. That's part of the problem. It opens up more labor to come into the United States. Oh, they say we're going to import more American things and that sort of thing. The only thing that we're going to export more of is American jobs. They'll go overseas. But we'll be importing a lot of labor, cheap labor, into the United States for what's left, just like NAFTA did. And that's part of these treaties. So I can say I'm against immigration deals on one hand and amnesty, but then down the road support the very documents that's going to allow it to become even worse. And that's what's going on, because Ryan supports all these free trade deals. He's really into it. And so it's sort of like being thrown into the briar patch. He didn't want to become Speaker of the House. Oh, don't make me Speaker of the House. Until everybody clamored for his doing so. I don't think it's going to change much in the long run. In the short run, yeah, okay, it's going to do some things. But in the long run, no change. You heard it here. Another thing that showed up just a couple of hours before we sat down to do these broadcasts is that out of the Russian system of Sputnik and Mir, those are two news bureaus in Russia, named after, the Sputnik satellite and Mir, the space station. But they called, just like calling it Associated Press or the New York Times, they put these things on their news services to promote, through the propaganda of that title, something that's very positive in the Russian scene. But at any rate, be that as it may, off of the Sputnik site, we get United States invites Russia and China to join TPP deal. Now, they're selling us on the idea that the TPP is something to block China. We've talked about that before. Now John Kerry has publicly stated that he would want Russia and China to cooperate and join in with the TPP, which is something we've been saying all along. Now, if you read strictly American publications and American propaganda, then we are having the TPP put forward to block China. But when you read the foreign press, it's something quite different, even from the mouth of Americans being quoted overseas, who have a great deal with this process. Something else that I think that we should briefly discuss is the big flap over the Republican debate with CNBC. Now, the thing is that a lot of people don't realize that there is a commission that controls this, that was put together by the Republican and Democratic national committees. And that commission is called the Commission on Presidential Debates. Very few people know about it. The League of Women Voters used to do this. They used to be the moderators. Very liberal outfit, the League of Women Voters. But the demands put on them by the two major parties to exclude any independent candidates caused them to drop out of moderating any of these debates. And so now they're moderated by the Commission on Presidential Debates. You don't ever hear about that in the media. On their board are people like Leon Panetta, the son of Warren Buffett, that sort of thing. And they don't like outsiders, and they don't like independents, period. So I think that what's going to happen out of this procedure, that is, if these outsiders do actually get the nomination, you'll see a repeat of the Goldwater campaign, where the Republican National Committee will do everything to destroy its own candidate. I was part of the Goldwater campaign. I saw it being done. It was from the top to the bottom. At the top, it was people like Nelson Rockefeller and George Romney, who is the father of Mitt Romney. They did everything they could to make sure that Goldwater could not be elected President of the United States. It was dirty business. It caused a lot of resentment. It caused a huge split in the Republican Party. And I predict that that will happen again if an outsider who is honest actually gets the nomination. The nominee that may claim that he's an outsider always look to see whether or not he really is. One of the things that they're touting is Rubio, for instance. Well, Rubio is a darling of the Council on Foreign Relations. So that's not being much of an outsider. And it's interesting also to find that the various polls disagree as to who won that debate, because the pundits on TV say one thing, the polls say another. Until next week, we'll see you then.